Morning to our listeners.
I hope you're well.
I'm blessed.
Well, first, okay, so she's joining us to have a conversation on former President John Dramani Mahama, who is flag bearer of the NDC's meetings with Guta and players in the petroleum sector. The meeting with the players in the petroleum sector happened yesterday. How do you go?
Sena, it went very well. The concern of the petroleum sector was that there hasn't been much investment in the sector, and there are too many challenges in the sector that they believe if government can solve, it will bring in the needed revenue in this country. You will recall that the two additional fields that we have today were added because of the visionary work of John Mahama. And so the Petroleum Chamber has been making a call to President Mahama to engage them more when he assumes the reins of power, to also, in line with his vision of making sure that Ghana maximizes its contribution or its revenue from petroleum, to pay more attention so that we can have more oil fields being added. In fact, they expressed concern that for some time now, the service providers at the upstream or in the upstream sector do not have much job to do because some of the investors are folding up. They make the case that Ghana is no longer, a very good place to invest because it was more profitable to invest in Cote d'Ivoire than Ghana because of the high taxes and the harassment from GRA and many other challenges. And so President Mahama reiterated his commitment to the sector and to say that he was going to invest more in the sector. He also reiterated an open door policy he used to run in the past when he was president, where any of the investors or upstream players could just walk to the Flagstaff House and raise concerns or complaints, and they will be addressed readily. And so he said that he was going to continue running that open door policy to work with stakeholders and to make sure that Ghana gets the needed revenue in our oil reserves.
So the two issues you raised were the two main concerns, that this is an area that is no longer as productive as it used to be. The sector was more productive for them then. What did they say were the major hindrances to the sector and why they preferred Cote d'Ivoire?
Okay, so first of all, you realize that the general macroeconomic conditions in Ghana are not favorable. Exchange rate depreciation. You simply cannot predict high inflation rates. High interest rates. And so when you compare the macroeconomic conditions in Ghana to other African countries, relatively, many African countries are doing better than Ghana. So investors don't see the need to invest more. For instance, Salo, says over the past years they've been here, they've invested over $10 billion. In the next 5 years, they are seeking to invest, in the next 10 years, they are seeking to invest an additional $5 billion. For you to invest these huge monies in any economy, you must be concerned about the exchange rate. You must be concerned about the rate of inflation. You must be concerned about, the level of unemployment and stability. Today, Ghana used to say that, we are relatively a peaceful country, and that has been the overriding consideration for investors in the past. But now, many African countries are relatively stable, so we are no longer using peace as a trump card to attract investment. So that many people are looking at a return on investment. And so if Cote d'Ivoire has been able to stabilize their general economic conditions, their macroeconomic indicators are spot on, then any investor would be looking at that, because they tell you that with the same amount of investment in Cote d'Ivoire, for instance, which is very close to us, they were likely to get 200% of what they would get in Ghana. So the question any rational investor will be asking is, why Ghana and not Cote d'Ivoire? You know, so the challenges they face calls for general governmental intervention to stabilize the general economy, to stabilize the exchange rate, to stabilize inflation, and also to pay attention to addressing the grievances. You recall that, for instance, ENI and Springfield has been in some major legal tussle. It was their hope that if government interventions were forthcoming, I mean, by this time, the unitization should have been done, or the parties should have been met halfway so that they can be, I mean, maximizing their investment. So the challenges are numerous and technical, but in a nutshell, this is what the engagement was about. And they kept reiterating the fact that they worked with President Mahama before. They know how committed he is. In fact, if you realize, one of the strongest points that came up is that when the NDC assumed the reins of power, they just didn't put any political appointee as regulators or CEOs of the regulators. They actually put in industry players who understood the industry, who appreciated the nuances of the industry and understood what needed to be done. And it's the reason why in record time we could add 2 additional oil fields. And it is instructive to say that despite all the work that the NDC government did to add the 2 additional oil fields, the NDC never benefited from any of the revenue. The first revenue came in 2017 when this government had already assumed power. And so you could see that in addition to all the cocoa and gold revenue, they've had more oil revenues than anybody. And yet we are at where we are, and yet we cannot service our debt, and yet things seem to have fallen apart. And so it was the expectation that in the coming years, the sector will see some good investment so that investors will be attracted, because they were concerned that Ghana has a lot of potential in oil and gas, and it's about time we discovered that. They were also mindful of the fact that in recent times we've been doing a lot of green energy and renewable energy sort of, but there could be a fine balance where Ghana can maximize its revenue. And that is the expectation, and the promise to industry players was that the NDC government was going to be committed and do the right investment in a way that brings much benefit to the people of Ghana as well.
Okay, so one thing, that you talk about the macroeconomic conditions. But with this specific demands, because if they're saying they are making, I put in the same amount of investment, I'm making about 200% more than I would have if I were in Ghana. Were they asking for specific things to be done? Because in some instances, I've heard people say, look at this tax, look at that tax, the taxation is too much, that is too much, that needs to be dealt with. Did they ask for any of those specific things to be looked at?
Yes. They also complain about the number of taxes. In fact, I recall one of the industry players saying that the only way government could have the needed taxes it wants or more taxes is when there is more production. And merely compiling or increasing the taxes to maximize revenue when production is going low is actually not the way to go. And so it's like a chicken and egg situation. If the government had invested more in the sector and had also aided the industry players more, production volumes would have increased, and then the taxes would have a corresponding increase as well. But in the case where there is no increase in production volumes, but then you keep imposing the taxes, you are basically crowding the businesses out. You're basically telling them that there is no incentive for them to continue to do what they're doing. And for most of them, they are already established in the sector here. And so they cannot just fold up like you had in the case of ExxonMobil, folding up and saying that we are leaving the shores of Ghana. The investment in the oil and gas sector is very huge. And so for you to say that you are folding up is also another big decision you have to make. So you could see that practically what they've been saying is that we are just coping. We are coping with the existing situations. And so we would wish that as government, you do something more innovative than just taxing, and taxing.
The promise is, you said the former president promised to be committed to resolving their issues. What are the specifics that he said he would do about this issue?
Their issues, some of basically has to do with investment, regulations, and compliance issues. If you see that the oil and gas sector is a heavily regulated industry. It's one of the industries that you have multiple regulators like the EPA, like the Petroleum Commission, among others. And so if you have an industry that is overly regulated, that also has to, cough out a lot of money by way of investment, which investment return will come in the next, sometimes in 10, 20 years before they recoup or they start making profits on their investment. And you have an environment like Ghana where you can no longer predict the economic conditions, then you are in for trouble. And so they are asking that President Mahama should rationalize taxation, first of all, so that taxation will be something that people can easily comply. Because when you overtax, people find ways to avoid and evade. And so now when it comes to the issue of taxation, let me say that it doesn't just have to do with the oil and gas sector. So many places we have gone to, in fact, 3 days ago before we met the upstream sector yesterday, we met with Guta and some other organizations. And there is one consistent thing, that the level of taxes are so high. Not just even the number of taxes, but the structure of the taxes also indirectly make them compound taxes. So that I'm sure we'll have an opportunity to talk about the Guta scenario. So that even though you would say that, okay, government has increased taxes to maybe 21%, by the way the tax has been introduced, it is not just a nominal figure of 21%, but by the time you look at the cascading effect, you are in the region of 30 and above. So, for instance, in the Guta case, they said that if you look at how the taxes have been imposed and in the manner in which they are calculated, they pay between 55 to 65% of the value of the goods. So if you are paying between 55 to 65 of the value of the goods, then it means by the time you add your cost of running the business and your profit margin, you will be about 100%. And that is why, relatively, you cannot find some macroeconomic stability in the country.
I see. And since you moved to the Guta angle, in fact, we've seen a couple of videos with the meeting with Guta. In fact, the Guta president, in one breath, praising the former president for the kind of open door policy he within which he worked when he was in government. But Guta is one of the associations that I have consistently spoken to. They've not been happy with the economic situation. They've been asking for a lot of things to change. Was it obvious from having an interaction with them that they still held this opinion? There's a lot to be worked on.
So there is a lot to be worked on, and sometimes if you don't take care, as part of the team that engages these stakeholders, you may start even falling into depression, because then you're trying to put yourself in their position, and you're trying to understand what is government's rationale for doing the things they do and in the manner they do it. And so you have a government that brought in something we call the benchmark value at the port to reduce some import duties for people, because in the words of the government, it was because many people were no longer patronizing the Tema harbor. And so if that is the case, and you have reduced, these duties, one would expect that the government would take time and let the members of Guta and everybody who plies their trade at the port have a direct benefit from this intervention. But it was not so, because the government's motivation for doing this benchmark value was not because they wanted to reduce taxes. It was because we had an impending election and government wanted to win. And so to create the impression that I understand your situation, they will throw in anything without going through the processes of policy making. Now, some 1 year, 6 months down the line, all those rebates they give to these traders and many businesses, because they had an election to win, had accumulated in the way that it has affected the economy so bad that you have had to come back to these people and overimpose taxes in a way that has collapsed their businesses. So, for instance, the Guta president makes the case that most of their members have lost their businesses because the exchange rate depreciation has swallowed up their capital. So now, as we speak, taxes and import duties change every Monday at the port. And you can call in anybody at the port to verify. Why? Because we cannot predict the exchange rate. The volatility of the exchange rate is so high that every Monday at the port. So let me give a typical example. If you sell, let's say, fish or clothes or car, and you import them at the port, if you have 2 containers and one arrives on Tuesday and the other arrives a week after, despite the fact that they are the same quantity, the same prices, and everything, you will pay different duties. Different duties will be paid on the same quantity and value of goods, because the duties are calculated in dollars. And then you are handed the bill in cedis. And so it is possible that this week you will pay duties of 50,000, and the next week you are paying duties of 55,000 because of the exchange rate depreciation. And this phenomenon, they say that is worrying them. So President Mahama, in addressing this concern, made a proposal that he was going to introduce what we call the fixed exchange rate at the port. What the fixed exchange rate will seek to do is to peg the dollar against the cedi at a certain agreed exchange rate, where, let's say, in 3 months, it will be easy for traders to know how much duties they will be paying on goods so that they can plan, and it can also help in pricing policy. And so they explain that when you go to the market and you ask for the price of something in the morning and it's 5 cedis, and you go back by afternoon and it's 10 cedis, it is not their fault, because the duty keeps changing. So if they hear that trader B just brought in goods and the prices or the duty has increased by, let's say, 10% or 20%, they have to increase it immediately. Otherwise, by the time they do their next importation, they will not have money to pay the duty. And so they were so excited about the fixed exchange rate proposal, so that they would be able to plan their businesses, and Ghanaians can also have some relative stability when it comes to the prices of goods and services. So the second thing that they were very happy about was that, you see, the Guta president made a statement that traders have missed President John Mahama. They say that there is a cartel at the port. And this cartel, of course, being appendages of the NPP, wants to crowd everybody out of business. And so when their goods arrive, you will see that by some machination, you are not able to clear it in between 7 to 14 days. By the time you realize, they say, oh, demurrage. The penalties that you have to pay sometimes are twice the duties you could not pay. And yet, when they have to sell or auction that good or the goods you bring into the country, they will sell it sometimes even 10% of the value of the goods. And so they give an example that, for instance, public sector workers will go to work and close at 2. So Monday, your bill is on their table, they close at 2. By Tuesday, additional ones have come. And the delay is not occasioned by them. To the extent that even weekend and holidays are computed as days which they have to do the clearing, it's affecting them. And so President Mahama assured them that in consonance with the 24-hour policy, the port is going to work 24/7. And also, he is going to take away those computations of weekends or holidays as clear days for clearing, so that the port must even work on weekends as well and holidays as well, to make sure that their businesses, get the right environment. And this is a belief because this is a man who did the harbor expansion for them and did the MPS terminal, which is operating 24 hours. The only challenge is the Gapoa component. And so they say that they trust him to the extent that he did the port expansion, which reduced the time of clearing, but they still have challenges. So now there was another interesting event that occurred about the number of taxes you have to pay when you clear your goods. And so when President Mahama started mentioning the taxes, they will mention one. He will mention a tax. Then they will count number 1. He will mention another tax. They will count. At the last count, you have to pay 22 different taxes before you can clear any goods you bring into the country.
That's about right.
22 different taxes with so many additions to the benefits of MPP's cronies. Now they pay disinfection tax. They pay sanitation tax. They complain of paying some fees and charges that have been just created as part of the value chain for the benefits of cronies of this government. And so President Mahama assured them that those taxes will be scrapped, especially those ones which are for the benefit of cronies of this government. And the traders, you could see that even if you didn't like President Mahama, they appreciated the fact that this is a man who can assist to grow our businesses. And so the Guta president says that, President Mahama, Ghanaian traders have missed you because they acknowledge that the needed legal and regulatory framework which was needed to give Ghanaians the right participation in the Ghanaian market was actually brought about by President Mahama, where Guta members controlled a chunk of the Ghanaian economy. Today, they say that the Ghanaian economy is either controlled by foreigners or cartels because the general economic conditions have deprived many Ghanaians the opportunity to participate. And so it is their hope that President Mahama will come and right the wrongs of this government, and rightly so that Ghanaians can have greater participation in the growth and development of the Ghanaian economy. And there were so many other things that President Mahama assured them, and especially because you remember in our tour of the Greater Accra region, we had engaged industry players in the port. They had brought out their proposals and what they believe should be done by the NDC government. And so we in dealing with Guta, we had a fair idea of what their challenges are. And so the solutions were fed to them. They were very satisfied.
I see. Very interesting. But I'm sure, and you're one of those who've had the privilege of following him about and also speaking on his behalf after some of these meetings. And I'm sure you've gotten, at least you've done your own assessment of how huge an issue is, of how big the task is ahead of a government if you form one after 2025. What's your own assessment of what you're hearing? Is Ghana in a state that can be fixed within a short period of time?
We have no option than to fix the country. You see, we must begin after the 2024 election to begin a process of nation building, a process of righting the wrong, a process of taking back those things which many people have appropriated for themselves and for the benefit of the family. Otherwise, every one of us risks being endangered species. So now the situations are so bad. I mean, people's situations everywhere we have gone to are so bad that you would ask whether the leaders in the MPP sleep on pillows when they sleep. Because from every sector, you get to every region, and the fishermen in the region are saying that they buy premixed fuel from hairdressers and MPP party branch chairmen. It is as if no government has been in power except the MPP government. Even in MPP, President Kufuor has been in power before, and you didn't see this level of wrath. Of course, every government will have their challenges. Of course, you will have some bad people forming part of government. But the most important thing is that anytime those things are discovered, the president do their best. President Kufuor did his best. President Mills did his best, President Mahama did his best. But under this government, the difference is that people are so emboldened to do the wrong thing because they know that the head is rotten, the top is rotten. The president himself is a clearing agent of all his appointees. So a corrupt appointee who has been cleared, obviously his subordinates who are working under him or her also have the right, courage to do the wrong thing because they know that after all, if you expose me, I'll expose you. And so we have a crisis on our hands. We have a situation where we have no option than to start somewhere. Every advanced country that you have seen, it has taken some time for them to build. But they have to take the first step. And sometimes I've heard people say that the road to the system is so bad that maybe we cannot fix it in 4 years. And I say that no, that's a lie. That is a big lie because, let me take it in the area of health. President Mahama built those monumental hospitals that you are seeing today, which has become the flagship achievement of the NDC in 4 years. And so it is possible to reform the health sector and give people the needed health facilities in 4 years. President Mahama was on a mission of building 200 secondary schools and rehabilitating existing ones in 4 years. And so it is possible to revive our educational sector, which has sunk so low in 4 years. What you need is an honest leader who will be committed to doing that. In the area of economy, you need a leader who is prudent. You need a leader who understands the very engineering of the Ghanaian economy to make the right decision. You will recall that this is a man that created the economic buffet, the sinking fund, the stabilization fund, the Exim Bank, the Ghana Infrastructure Fund, because he recognized that if you are building a country and you are building an economy, you will need what we call economic buffers to hold the economy down in times of difficulties. And that is exactly what he did. And that is exactly what he will be doing. And so, for a man who has had the opportunity of leading this nation before, for a man who has had the opportunity of consolidating our gains in the past, is the best person to restore this nation. And so it can't be done in the short term. We have to start somewhere. And I will say that if you are listening to me this morning, whether you are NDC, you are MPP, you are CPP, or you are apolitical, it should not matter. What should matter to you is that Ghana must take its rightful position again. Otherwise, this government will be so emboldened and empowered to sell all the resources. Is this not the same government that sought to mortgage all our mineral reserves? Is this not the same government that took away all the assets of this nation that belong to ECG under the PDS scandal? Today, we are having to discuss the level of cronyism and corruption that we have never experienced in our country before. And if you engage every stakeholder we have engaged, the AGI, fishermen, laborers, teachers, doctors, and all the groups across this nation, there is one chorus and one conclusion. Things are simply not going well. The situation is so bad that it needs a rapid response, and we are certain that the NDC is the only political party in Ghana that has development as its goal to be able to restore the lost glory of this nation and to be able to help the people to make their lives better.
Well, let me conclude then by taking your views on something. But there are two stories. The Daily Dispatch, if elected, President Mahama will cancel free senior high school Team Baumia cautions voters. In fact, they have some quotes from that press conference that they organized yesterday. The success of the free SHS policy is a threat to the NDC and their perennial flag bearer who believes Ghanaians have short memories. Ghanaians do not have short memories, as he has always assumed. Ghanaians remember how students were sacked from class due to inability of their parents to pay their fees. The suggestion is that the free SHS is not safe under former President Mahama. What do you say?
You see, yesterday I had the opportunity of listening to the press conference, and so I don't really think you should even use precious airtime to discuss this, because you see, this conference is just a panic reaction. You will recall that late last year, the EIU released its poll and says that the NDC was most likely to form the next government. Just, I think, yesterday or 2 days ago, the Global Info Analytics also released the poll, putting President Mahama in a commanding lead, with Baumia trailing with, I think, 39% or so. And so it's just a panic reaction to say that Ghanaians have seen the light. Ghanaians have seen which president. I mean, the benefit of this election is that both parties or both candidates have had the opportunity to be at the presidency. And so which candidate can be trusted? Which candidate is honest? Which candidate has the requisite administrative capacity to do the work and to help Ghana get to where we want to get to? And the conclusion is overwhelming, that it's President Mahama. And so the MPP says that let's do a press conference. I mean, rain baseless allegations, get the NDC to be debating us so that we put Baumia on the same level as President Mahama. Please, we cannot compare apples to pawpaw. And we will not, descend that low and go into the gutters with them and be debating this, because the records are there to show that when it comes to education, no government has invested in education than the NDC government. And you see, for me, it's the effrontery of the MPP and the fact that there is no level of shame anymore associated with public service. This is a government that for 4 years has not been able to provide textbooks for basic education. And they are inviting the NDC to debate education. This is a government that they have not been able to clear schools under trees, whereas the NDC cleared 2,091 schools under trees, completed and operationalized. This government has not done anything, and they want a debate in education. Whereas we are being told that our younger sisters and brothers in secondary schools are having to drink tea without milk and bread. People are eating gari with palm oil. People do not have the necessary things. You are running a double track. And the teachers, the stakeholders, and everybody is saying that we are destroying our education. They are assuming that everybody is gullible. So let's just invite the NDC to a debate. We don't engage in baseless debates. I think we have a nation to build. We have a nation to rescue. So we need to explain to the many young people who cannot find jobs under this government. Today, unemployment is 14.7, all-time high in 40 years. So the young people are beginning to appreciate the 24-hour economy. They are beginning to appreciate who has the potential to give them the needed future. And they are coming to the conclusion that it's President Mahama. The polls are showing. And so the MPP just wants to say something to get Ghanaians to think that they are doing something. So now this is much ado about nothing.
I see. Well, thank you very much for speaking to us.
You're welcome.
Beatrice Annan Esquire is a member of the NDC's communication team, one of those who speaks for